Hello everybody, I'm Gwen Campbell-Mindes. Welcome to Gwen's Bookish Ramblings, and I'm still on this because I went on a tear. So, in this next book, in the Innkeeper, Sweep, whatever series, we take a leap sideways. In the last book, our heroine Dina DeMille went on a trip to save her older sister because her sister had sent her a message basically asking for help, and so the last book had basically started with her heading out there to rescue her and her daughter Helen. So Helen and Maud both come stay at the inn, help them fight off the invading hordes, because of course they were invading hordes, and then the two of them, at the end of it, head off with the vampire Arland, who had previously been trying to get Dina to get into a romantic something or other with him. But he basically immediately has switched all of his attentions over to the sister, because the sister is much more sort of his speed. She had previously married a vampire from a different house than his. The vampires have a very, very formal feudal system, and so they have capital H houses, and like I said, it's very feudal, and she had married a younger son of, I suppose you could consider it to be like unto a smaller duchy. Anyways, he'd turned out to be a self-centered jerk who got the three of them, because the family had also exiled the daughter, even though, she was 3, and maybe you shouldn't make a 3-year-old child go through exile. But anyways, Maud and her husband Melisard and their daughter Helen were all 3 of them exiled, and then Melisard acted like a moron and managed to get himself killed, and so Maud is now trapped on Space Australia and has to be rescued, and so they rescue her. But the thing is, she is a highly ambitious and skilled and very tough swordswoman, and she had been given vampire armor at her, in her previous life as the wife of a vampire duke's younger son. And Arland is just deeply, deeply into her, and also really, really loves her kid, and there's this whole thing. Anyways, she agrees to head back with him because, among other things, her daughter is half vampire, and the vampire genes are very much ascendant, which means that she has fangs like a vampire, she is faster and stronger, and all kinds of things. And Maud grew up as an innkeeper's kid, and the thing about the innkeepers is that you wind up isolated if you're a child of an innkeeper, because you don't have a community that you can really be a part of, because you are, part of this paranormal thing, but also because you are living at a hotel, at an inn. You have these people who come in and out of your life. They are not permanent parts of your life. You don't have the ability to really go to school. Dina had apparently insisted and really, really wanted to go to a regular high school, but the problem is that you can't invite your friends over because they can't set foot within this space, because there are actual laws about not exposing the paranormal world to outsiders. And so you can't bring your friends home, and you can't explain exactly what your parents do, because sure, you can say my parents run a bed and breakfast, but then that once again raises the question, well, then why can't anybody who's, why can't anybody stay there? Why can't we just go into the building? And so on and so forth. And it it means that you can't talk about it in the same way that you wouldn't be able to talk about it if your parents were in the mafia. And so, even in high school, if you go to a regular high school, you wind up tremendously isolated and having to lie constantly about everything. And so, it makes you isolated, and most of the innkeeper's kids get homeschooled, and so you grow up just really, really isolated from any peers, from anything else. And I mean, clearly there is an ability to make friends outside of the community and so on, but it's really, really limited. And Maud, who watched her younger sister go through these really, really angry phases of wanting to have a normal life, of wanting to have friends, of wanting to be able to just exist with other people, again, because you get isolated by the nature of these paranormal innkeepers' lives, doesn't want that for her daughter, and agrees to head back to Arland's house, that is, the House Krar, because it means that she can put her daughter into a class with other vampire kids, and she doesn't have to hide who she is, and she doesn't have to pretend, and she can just be normal within the given context of vampire normal. Which, as an adult, she can understand better her younger sister's, point and isolation. Anyways, so this story covers her arrival and her time as she works through her issues and deals with the prejudice against her in that house. That there's, all of these vampires who basically sneer down their nose at her, not merely because she's human, but because of how she got retrieved, and because of how Arland approached her, because everybody does a sort of a face-palming thing, and they're like, so, he called us and he said, I'm bringing home my, future wife, and then called us back and said, well, she's turned me down, but I'm still bringing her, and, nobody knows what to do with that. Like I said, they're a very formal feudal society, and so there's a lot of everybody knowing their respective ranks and knowing how to address everybody because they understand who everyone is and so on and so forth, and saying, I'm bringing home a fiancé that none of you knew about until just now, that I met 30 seconds ago, is already appalling, but to have him add, by the way, I'm still bringing her, but she's turned me down, but I'm bringing her and the kid anyways, it's a problem because nobody really knows what to do with that, and that she's married a vampire previously and was exiled to, like I said, Space Australia, which, it's basically a penal colony, and they don't really know what to do with her, and they are all deeply concerned that she is basically just a gold digger, because House Krar is big. Like, if the house that she had been with previously was probably closer to a minor lord with some land, whereas House Krar is a duchy, is a dukedom, is a thing that is big and powerful and a heavyweight within the politics of the vampire society, which is called the Holy Anocracy. And so, to them, she looks like somebody who is, trying to worm her way into the upper echelons. And so she spends a lot of time just having to prove herself again and again and again. But also, this book has a lot about the psychological side effects of what she went through because she fell in love with her first vampire husband. And as we go through this book, it becomes very clear that one of the things that her husband's family had done was treat her like a pet that does tricks. Look at this human. We've taught her how to speak ancient vampire languages, and she can memorize bardic lays and recite them. Isn't she a fun toy? And having that state, even if she wasn't really consciously aware of it until until she was sort of thinking things over with the distance of her husband being dead for, at least a year and everything that she'd gone through, and looking back on it, it still did a number on her sense of self, on her sense of self-worth. And the entire time that she's there, she's well aware, especially because she's well aware of the classes of and caste system of the vampire society. She's really, really aware of that, especially because the last family had been social climbers of the worst kind who had tried to be more proper than everyone else as part of their nouveau riche attempts to fit in, to make themselves more respectable and more powerful. And so she's got a slightly skewed view about vampire proprieties because she had wound up in a family that sort of over-observed them in a desperate bid to be, to sort of overcome their lower status within the system. And so she is really, really sharply, painfully aware of these issues, and sort of it feeds her, inner sense of inadequacy. Eventually, though, she and Arland sort of fall into bed together and agree on a thing, and at the end of the book, she does agree to marry him, and so, all's well that ends well. This one also ends with a post-credits, dun 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 moment, because her brother, who has been missing for, ever, ever since their parents vanished, and with, leaving no trace behind, and he'd just been gone, ostensibly searching for them, he just shows up at the front door out of nowhere at the end of the book. So, I don't know if that will actually kick in the last book I have access to in the series or not, but it's clear that, something was in the offing there. But anyhow, so this one it has a very different quality to it, but at the same time, her training as an innkeeper sort of loops things back into this being an innkeeper series, in which case, in that, there is a role within a vampire house called the Maven, who is basically kind of like the person who runs all of their social events and so on. Makes arrangements for parties and weddings and capitally events. And when they have two alien species staying with them, which is very unusual for vampires who are insular and slightly speciesist, she sort of winds up in the position of handling that because as an innkeeper's child, she has had all of that experience at dealing in various species, which makes her the perfect fit for the Maven role, which she steps into by the end, which is probably part of why she agrees to finally marry Arland, is because she is no longer, Maud without any sort of history or role or what have you. She has been made the Maven of this house, which means she has a role and a place and a rank that she can bring to the table, and I think that settles it in her so that she agrees to marry Arland and, ostensibly live happily ever after. This is an interesting one with a lot of sword fighting, and basically almost no innkeeper stuff. But the world building spirals outward. Anyways, so that's everything, and I will see you all next week.